When you have this engaging conversation that Drucker talked about, it forces a better analysis. And one of the things that we realize is that you can never be sure of an outcome. I mean, business is a contact sport, right? Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, you can't guarantee success. The question is, have you been as rigorous as possible in the analysis of the options? So there are three models for what we basically suggest, which is how do you instill more effective discussion inside the decision-making process. One example comes from Alfred P. Sloan, who was the man who really built the modern corporation. He was the CEO of General Motors. And there's a story about Sloan in one of his executive meetings saying to his group, okay, gentlemen, are we all agreed on this decision? And everybody says yes. And he said, well, I propose then that we adjourn this meeting until we have had time to understand why we should disagree. Right? Have we really sort of thought this through and thought about the downsides? There's an older story that comes from the ancient Persians, around the time when they ruled much of the Middle East and Central Asia. They had a tradition of making their decisions always twice. The first time when they were drunk, and then when they were sober. They would deliberate on important topics at nighttime over meals, wine, and whatnot, make their decision, and they would reconvene in the light of day and say, do we still agree? And it was a normal process to say, no, we don't agree anymore. And in a lot of ways, we think that a lot of business, and we're not saying that business people are making their decisions drunk over wine, but oftentimes there's the heat of the moment, right, that comes into play when decisions are made, and we think it's okay to step back a little bit. And the third example comes from the Catholic Church. For hundreds of years, in the canonization process, there was an official who was known as the devil's advocate, who was a representative of the Pope in the Congregation of Rites, whose job it was to question all the evidence brought forth before the group about whether or not someone should become a saint. And there are various hurdles you have to make, but a certain number of miracles and all that. His job was to say, hey, what kind of person was this? Was that really a miracle? Right? And no decision, no evidence was ever approved unless the devil's advocate was there and agreed to it. John Paul II actually changed the canonization process in the early 80s. And since that time, the rate of canonization has increased more than tenfold. And I'm not saying there's anything going on. But there's a long tradition of having someone formally charged with being the person who questions and therefore opening up the conversation for questioning.